This day in sports history. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have zero regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. Hey there, and welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. More info, more podcasts can be found at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's March 6th, and the excitement is building for March Madness. We're in the midst of conference tournaments, so let's go back to 1954 and the first ACC Tournament Championship game. The Atlantic Coast Conference had formed in the spring of 1953 after 7 universities seceded from the Southern Conference to form a new league, mostly because they had plans to play big-time football. The South had been a more popular football region than basketball, by far, and it wasn't until Everett Case was brought from Indiana in 1946 and injected the South with his new brand of fast-paced hoops that the region kind of started to come around to watching basketball and making it more of an equal. The original 7 schools that became the Atlantic Coast Conference were North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, South Carolina, Clemson, Duke, and Maryland. Virginia came along a few months later to round off the league with 8 teams. Case and his Wolfpack had dominated the Southern Conference postseason tournament, 1, because they had great teams, and 2, because with the newly built Reynolds Coliseum on the NC State campus, he insisted that they host the tournament every spring, providing a nice little home court advantage. When the ACC formed, Case took the tradition of a postseason tournament and went a step further, saying that the winner of the tournament should be crowned the league champion, and therefore should be the league's representative in the NCAA tournament. No other league was doing that, and with the expansion of the NCAA tournament from 8 teams to 22 in 1953, the timing actually worked out. When it was just an 8-team bracket, there was only 1 representative per region, and it had not been associated specifically with a conference. The expansion to 22 and eventually 25 teams allowed for automatic bids to specific leagues, such as the ACC. Coaches mostly insisted that the regular season champion, the team that played better over the course of several months, should be crowned at the end instead of a team that played well for 3 days. But Case loved the tourney. It was reminiscent of his time as a high school basketball coach in Indiana. It was exciting, and of course, additional ticket revenue from an event like that pumped money back into the athletic programs of the member institutions. Well, here in the first edition of the ACC tournament, the Duke Blue Devils had been tops during the regular season, and they were ranked number 11 in the country. Case's Wolfpack had been the 4th best team in the conference. After State topped North Carolina by a point in the opening round, and Duke pummeled Virginia by 28, the Wolfpack and Blue Devils met in the semifinals. State won that one on its home court 79-75 to advance to the championship game against Dickie Hemrick and Wake Forest, who'd had to go to overtime in both of its tournament games to get there. It was a rematch of the previous year's Southern Conference championship game that the Deacons had won. State had a 2-point lead and the ball with a minute and a half to play, but a Demon Deacon steal and a bucket tied it, and the first title game headed to overtime. The extra period was back and forth until State's Dick Tyler rebounded his own missed shot and laid it in to give the Wolfpack the 2-point lead. Wake could not find the equalizer on the other end, and NC State won 82-80 in overtime. On 3 successive nights, the Pack had beaten their greatest rivals to win the conference title. After the game, Coach Case did something that had not been seen in the South, but would soon become a tradition that you now see everywhere this time of year. He sent his team back on the floor to cut the nets down. On this day in 2015, the NCAA dropped the hammer on Syracuse head basketball coach Jim Boeheim, suspending him for 9 games, revoking 12 scholarships, and vacating 101 wins. It was the result of a long investigation conducted by the NCAA that dated as far back as 2001. The investigation uncovered academic misconduct, extra benefits given to players, a failure to follow the drug testing policy, and impermissible booster activity. The NCAA's statement issued on this day said, "Over the course of a decade, Syracuse University did not control and monitor its athletics programs, and its head men's basketball coach failed to monitor his program. The program was placed on a 5-year probation and excluded from postseason play that season." While Boeheim acknowledged responsibility since he was head of the program, his statement also threw the spotlight on what he called a former employee of the local YMCA and his former director of basketball operations in order to impose an unprecedented series of penalties upon the university and the men's basketball program. That former employee of the YMCA was a booster who paid 2 basketball players and 3 football players up to $8,000 to volunteer at the local YMCA. After appeals played out, most of the sanctions were upheld, but the scholarship revocation was reduced from 12 to 8. If the 101 wins were added back into his coaching resume, he would still be second on the all-time wins list to Duke's Mike Krzyzewski. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Homefield Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. On this day in 1982, George Gervin and his San Antonio Spurs found themselves in a shootout with the Milwaukee Bucks. This one went back and forth throughout the night, and there was never a lead larger than 6 points, and the Iceman was having himself a night. Now, I have not watched George Gervin footage in years, and I had forgotten just how smooth of an operator the Iceman was. He had a variety of shots in his arsenal, and many of those were simply unstoppable.
They want to go to Gervin. They've isolated him. He's 1-on-1, now 1-on-2. He's got every shot you can imagine and then some. He had 3 people on him.
Left-handed scoop.
On the other side, the Bucks were riding the hot hand of Brian Winters. Now, Winters was one of the 4 guys traded for Kareem back in '75, and I may or may not have called him a stiff in an earlier edition of this show. Winters was most definitely not a stiff on this night or even his career, and for that I apologize and should have corrected it. But Winters averaged 16 points a game over his 9-year NBA career, and he poured in 42 in this one, a point shy of his career high. Winters scored Milwaukee's final 13 points in regulation, including the game-tying bucket.
Brian Winters, he gets the pressure.
Got to go for 3.
It's on the way, John. Looks good. Oh! Baby!
Do you believe it?
I don't believe it. Was he fouled? Was he fouled?
No.
Oh, I don't believe it.
I do not believe it. He banked it. Unbelievable.
That tied it at 131 and sent the game to overtime. After both teams scored 14 in the first and then 12 in the second overtime, it was on to the third OT.
They're trying to find Gervin. There he is. 3-point range. He hit it. I mean, he hits from everywhere. But he was right on the line, just over the line, John, so he gets 2. Nightmares about this one.
How about that guy?
Left-hand hook by Gervin. Every shot that ever was conceived and then some.
Yeah, everyone's going to see him.
Gervin scored 10 of the Spurs' 14 points in the third extra period, and San Antonio pulled away for the 171-166 win. Gervin finished with 50. Teammate Mike Mitchell had a double-double of 45 points and 11 rebounds. The 337 combined points set a new NBA record. It's now third on that list. On this day in 2000, it was another episode of Don't Mess with Shaq. This day's victim was the LA Clippers. So it's Shaq's birthday. Happy birthday, Shaq. In 2000, he was with the LA Lakers, and at that point, he was turning 28. So the Lakers and the Clippers shared an arena at this point, and when they played each other, one team had to be designated the home team, and on this night, the Clippers were the home team, and they controlled the ticketing for the game. With it being his birthday, he asked the Clippers for a few extra tickets for his family coming to the game that night. The Clippers said no. So he bought the extra tickets and then recouped his money with interest that night.
Shaq guarded by Avent 6'9". Shaq backs in, turns, shoots, 8-foot jumper, and his birthday is good. That's his first birthday back. Taken by George. They'll get a chance to get it back to Shaq. Kobe underneath gives to Shaq. Shaq slam dunk.
Shaq scored 61 points, grabbed 23 rebounds in a 123-103 Lakers win. It was the first 60-20 performance in the league in more than 30 years. It had not been done since Wilt Chamberlain did it in '69. Clippers interim head coach Jim Todd said after the game, it was obvious he wanted to make a point, and he did. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Portland, Oregon was very nearly named Boston. The naming of the city came down to the best 2 out of 3 coin flips between two men, Asa Lovejoy and Francis Pettygrove. Lovejoy was from Boston, and he wanted to name this newly established place after his hometown. Pettygrove wanted to honor his hometown of Portland, Maine. Obviously, Pettygrove won the coin toss and kept the lucky penny until gifting it to the Oregon Historical Society. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.